My name is Camille and I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. Until my fiancé Daniel humiliated me in front of his business associates at a high-end Manhattan bistro and slapped me in front of a full dining room. I wish I could say that was the worst of it. But behind that moment was a history built on control, manipulation, and emotional abuse. What I mistook for love was a slow erosion of my self-worth. Daniel didn't just insult me that night. He made it clear. I was merely a prop in the carefully curated image he showed the world. The man I had trusted had spent years chipping away at my independence, while his influential family enabled and defended him at every turn. The restaurant was the kind you booked weeks in advance. The kind with $60 entrees, velvet booths, and a pianist softly playing Cole Porter in the corner. I had taken the whole afternoon off to get ready. A deep green cocktail dress, soft curls pinned just right, and makeup I hadn't worn in months. Tonight he was introducing me to his corporate partners. I thought it meant something. When I arrived, he didn't get up. No kiss, no smile. Just a glance and a muttered, "That's what you wore?" followed by a low laugh from the table. Not mine. His friend Greg smirked while sipping a $30 glass of bourbon. My stomach sank, but I swallowed the feeling and took my seat. Traffic was brutal, I said, trying to defuse the moment. Daniel ignored me completely, already knee-deep in a conversation about IPOs and private equity. Every time I tried to chime in, I was cut off or talked over. I wasn't included. I was background noise. The only time he addressed me directly was to criticize or mock. "That's not how mergers work, Cam," he said condescendingly after I made a comment about a headline I'd read. Then came the body shaming. "Careful with that bread, don't want to outgrow that dress." A chuckle from another suit across the table. My cheeks burned. I stared down at the linen napkin on my lap, my appetite long gone. Then without warning he slapped me. Not hard, but in front of everyone. The room hushed for a moment, forks pausing mid-air. My heart stopped. No one said a word. I stood up dazed. My vision blurred, not from tears but rage. I turned and left, walking straight into the night without my coat. It wasn't the slap that broke me. It was realizing that the man who promised me forever had never seen me as an equal, only a possession. And it was the moment I realized I would never let anyone treat me like that again. That night didn't end me. Started something new. Then he said it, "God, you're so ugly when you get upset." The words hit harder than the slap that followed a moment later. Silence swept over the table like a cold wind. His colleagues, suited, slick, and suddenly still, glanced at each other, then back down at their cocktails, pretending they hadn't heard or seen anything. I sat frozen. My breath caught in my throat. A sick heaviness settled in my stomach and the room warped around the edges. The chatter and clinking silverware faded to a dull hum, like I was underwater. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I did the one thing I promised myself I would never do again. I looked at him, searching for some flicker of remorse, some sign that the man I once fell in love with was still there. Daniel just smirked. I should have stood up. I should have walked away right then. But instead I leaned in and whispered, "Why are you doing this?" His eyes narrowed, not in guilt but in annoyance. Like I had just ruined his evening. Then his hand connected with my cheek. It wasn't hard enough to leave a bruise, but sharp enough to steal my breath. My eyes stung. The heat spread fast across my face. And I hated myself, for staying in that seat, for shrinking into silence, for giving him the satisfaction of my stillness. No one moved. No one protested. Even the waiter, eyes flickering with uncertainty, slid the check onto the table and vanished. Daniel chuckled, reclining like he was in his own living room. "She's just being dramatic," he said to his friends, waving it off. My fingers touched my cheek. It was burning. I looked around, at strangers, at familiar faces, at the city's polished elite. But not one pair of eyes met mine. The table resumed its quiet clatter like nothing had happened. Like I had imagined it. No one cared. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't the first time Daniel had tried to tear me down. It was just the first time I finally saw it for what it was. I drove through Manhattan in silence. Streetlights smeared across the windshield like brushstrokes. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they turned white. My cheeks still burned, but it was the fire inside that hurt more. I opened the door to our apartment. Quiet, dark, empty. Daniel wasn't home. Of course not. He was probably out laughing, proud of the scene he'd made. Of the control he still had. I kicked off my heels. They hit the floor loud and careless. In the hallway mirror, my reflection stared back. Red cheek, glossy eyes, trembling lips. But not broken. Not this time. Unrecognizable. Mascara streaked down my cheeks. My lipstick smeared like some tragic afterthought. My eyes hollow. My chest tight. I reached up and traced the faint red imprint still glowing on my cheek. Daniel's parting gift. A bitter laugh slipped out. Look at you, Camille. Look what you've become. I drifted to the kitchen, numb, fingers trembling as I reached for the bottle of wine sitting on the marble counter. I didn't bother with a corkscrew. I'd opened it yesterday after another one of Daniel's icy silences. I poured too much into the glass. The first sip stung, but I didn't stop. I needed to quiet the voice screaming inside me. Because tonight, for the first time since I said yes to Daniel's ring, I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. Furious at him. Furious at myself. Because it hadn't started tonight, and deep down I knew that. This had been building for years. I thought back to the beginning when he first charmed me into giving up control of our finances. It's just easier, he said, that smooth Wall Street confidence in every syllable. You hate spreadsheets, babe. Let me take care of the boring stuff. I'd been relieved at the time. Grateful even. I told myself it was one less thing to worry about. Then came the suggestions. Let's put everything in one account, make it easier to manage. He offered to keep my credit card for emergencies. I laughed and said sure. Months later I tried logging into our Chase account. The password was different. Oh right. I changed it, he said, barely looking up from his phone. I'll text it to you. He never did. At first I told myself it didn't matter. We were a team. Marriage was about trust, right? But slowly his answers started to shift. When I asked about the balance, the budget, anything, his tone sharpened. Camille, don't you trust me? Always framed like an accusation. And I fell for it. Every time. Until I stopped asking altogether. I didn't realize how far he'd pushed me out of my own life until I couldn't find my way back in. The comments came next. Teasing at first. That dress doesn't do you any favors. Then it got mean. You were hotter when we first met. Eventually, it got cruel. You should be lucky someone like me even wanted you. I'd convinced myself I was overthinking, being too sensitive. But standing there in our sleek Manhattan kitchen, cheeks still warm from his slap, glass trembling in my hand, I saw it all for what it was. This wasn't about love. This was strategy. Daniel had been sculpting me into something smaller, quieter, easier to control. And I had let him. But not anymore. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone, scrolling aimlessly. I wasn't reading, just moving. Anything to drown out the pounding silence echoing in my chest. That's when I saw it. An old email. One I hadn't opened in years. It had come in a few months after I graduated from NYU, during a time when I was barely staying afloat. It was from Chase. The college savings account my mom had started when I was a kid. Money she scraped together from double shifts as a nurse in Queens. Was gone. Closed. Drained. Transferred out. The signature on the authorization? Daniel. I had called him immediately, my voice trembling. I remember pacing our tiny apartment in Astoria, trying not to cry. His response. Camille, relax. My brother had an opportunity. He just needed a little boost. You're smart, you'll figure it out. No apology. No concern. Just that same arrogant shrug he always used when I was upset. Like when I twisted my ankle years ago and he'd muttered, "Come on, walk it off." When I told his mother, Eleanor, she just gave that tight, polished smile of hers. What's done is done, darling. No use crying over it. Dwelling won't bring the money back. So I didn't. Instead, I took out private loans. I worked 2 jobs. One at a coffee shop in Soho, the other walking dogs in the freezing winter, to pay tuition and rent. I kept the emails, the bank records, everything. Not for revenge. Not then. But because I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. That it happened. That it wasn't just bad luck, or life being hard. That they had taken something sacred from me and never looked back. And I had let it go. I told myself it was for the family. That maybe I was overreacting. I buried the betrayal under layers of rationalization and called it forgiveness. But tonight, I saw the truth. It wasn't one mistake. It was a cycle. A legacy of silencing me, of erasing my needs and calling it love. They didn't just steal money. They stole my foundation. My voice. My worth. I stood up slowly, catching my reflection in the window pane. I looked composed, lipstick retouched, wine in hand, but I saw it now, the cracks behind my eyes. Cracks that had been forming since the day I was told to be quiet and grateful. Not anymore. I opened a private cloud folder I hadn't touched in years. Scanned through PDFs, bank statements, archived screenshots of Daniel's brother's failed tech startup. Launched the same month my savings vanished. Then I paused over one contact. Delphine. His aunt. The only person in that family who had ever seen me. Can we talk tomorrow? I typed. My thumb hovered over send. And then I hit it. I had let him tear my confidence down brick by brick. But tonight Daniel made a mistake. He thought I'd stay quiet. Thought I'd wake up tomorrow, fix my hair, smooth on some concealer and pretend nothing had happened. Like I always did. But for the first time in years I felt something stronger than fear. I felt rage. Real pulsing bone-deep fury. The kind that doesn't shake. The kind that clears your vision. I set the empty wine glass on the counter, the clink loud in the still apartment. My hands steady. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. Daniel wasn't going to win. Not this time. Not ever again. And anger, I realized, was a far more dangerous weapon than heartbreak. Later, I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, the city's glow casting sharp shadows across the walls. My cheeks still throbbed faintly, but it was nothing compared to the fire churning in my chest. Sleep was a fantasy. I couldn't turn my mind off. Not now. My phone lit up. I turned it over, half expecting some half-hearted apology from Daniel. Or worse, a voice message trying to flip the story, telling me I was being dramatic, overly emotional. But it wasn't from him. It was a notification from our joint checking account. Another withdrawal. I sat up fast. My heart thudded like a warning bell in my chest. Daniel was still out, probably drinking somewhere downtown, smug and satisfied. And still spending. I grabbed my laptop and opened our bank dashboard, the one I hadn't touched in months because he made me feel foolish for even asking. I scrolled. Line after line. Charges. Transfers. Names I didn't recognize until one stopped me cold. Emma Caldwell. The name dropped into my stomach like a stone. He'd mentioned her once. A junior analyst at his firm. Just a name and a throwaway joke. I hadn't thought twice about it. But now there it was again. Thousands of dollars moved in staggered transfers. From our shared accounts. Through his business. Then to her. My fingers went ice cold. This wasn't just infidelity. This was fraud. He wasn't just betraying me, he was putting everything at risk. His company. Our future. My name. For what? A 24-year-old and an ego trip? I clenched my fist. Not this time. I opened his phone records and found her number. She was on his call log. Yesterday. The first call went to voicemail. I didn't stop. I called again. And again. It was the fourth call before she finally picked up. Who the hell is this? She snapped, her voice thick with sleep and irritation. Let's not play games, Emma, I said coolly. My voice surprised even me, sharp, measured, lethal. I know who you are. More importantly, I know exactly what you've been doing with my husband. Silence. Then a breathy little laugh. Oh, please. You're the wife, right? She added, tone curling with amusement. The one she stopped herself, but it was too late. The smugness leaked through every syllable. He thought this was funny. You think this is about the affair? I interrupted, letting my words cut the air like glass. You really believe that's the issue here? Another pause. I let it drag out. Let her sit in it. Then I dropped the hammer. I know about the money, Emma. And just like that, her amusement vanished. What? The transfers, I said. From Daniel's business accounts. Filtered through 2 dummy vendors and straight into yours. You think no one would notice? There was a sharp inhale on the other end. I didn't know. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice low and cold. I've got the records. I've got it all. And unless you feel like explaining this to a federal investigator, you're going to start talking. Now. I could hear her breathing change, shallow, fast. He said, she whispered. He told me it was fine. That it was a temporary fix. That he had it covered. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Oh yeah. And what did he promise you, Emma? That he'd take care of you? That he was leaving me? A beat. Then a whisper. He said you two weren't really together. That I was a burden? I finished for her. The words didn't sting anymore. Not now. Not after everything. I'd spent years shrinking to fit his mold. The supportive wife. The perfect plus one. The woman who kept quiet. But I wasn't her anymore. Emma exhaled shakily. What are you going to do? I smiled. Oh, sweetheart, I murmured, voice like silk over steel. I'm going to burn his world to the ground. By the time I hung up, I was already moving. Screenshots, emails, call logs. All of it backed up to the cloud and an encrypted drive. Daniel thought he had control. But he forgot who he was really married to. Daniel thought I was too soft, too blind, too wrapped up in appearances to see what he was really doing. He was wrong. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to burn every bridge behind him, salt the earth, and make sure he had nowhere left to run. Step 1. Let him know I wasn't afraid anymore. Morning filtered through the blinds, casting pale streaks of sunlight across the hardwood floor of our Upper West Side apartment. The city was just waking up, but I'd never fallen asleep. My mind had been spinning since my call with Emma. I could still hear the panic in her voice when she realized the safety net Daniel promised her didn't exist. But this wasn't just about her. It never was. Daniel hadn't just cheated. He had weaponized trust. Built his reputation, his success, our entire marriage on a web of carefully spun lies. And now, piece by piece, I was unraveling it. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number. For a moment I hesitated. Could be a lawyer. A compliance officer. Someone responding to the quiet chaos I'd started behind the scenes. But the voice that crackled through the speaker? It wasn't official. You need to stop. My blood chilled. My grip tightened on the phone. If you know what's good for you, the voice continued, low and distorted, you'll drop this. Walk away while you still can. Pause. Then a chuckle. Just a friendly warning, Mrs. Caldwell. I stood frozen, phone still to my ear long after the line went dead. My coffee had gone cold. My heart raced. They were watching. Listening. Trying to scare me. And Daniel? He walked in at noon like nothing had happened. Tie loosened, hair windblown, arrogance intact. I got a call this morning, I said, meeting him at the entryway. Someone told me to back off. He didn't even look up. And, I echoed, incredulous. You don't even care? He snorted. Jesus, Camille, you sound paranoid. Probably a scam. Or maybe you're just playing the victim again. I clenched my fists. I could feel him testing me. Waiting for me to fold. But not this time. You know what I think? I said, stepping in close. I think you're scared. And you should be. For a split second his eyes flickered. Then knock knock, a sharp rap at the door. I didn't have to ask. Let me guess, I muttered. Daniel smiled coolly. Right on time. Evangeline and Edmund Caldwell strolled in like they were royalty. Camille, darling, Evangeline said smoothly, her crimson lips curling into a practiced smile that never touched her eyes. We heard there's been some unrest and we felt it best to come speak with you directly. She lowered herself gracefully into the velvet chair across from me. Chanel suit immaculate, posture perfect, every inch the society matriarch. Edmund remained standing behind her, hands clasped, his silence louder than any words. Daniel sat beside them, arms folded, jaw tight. I knew exactly what this was. Damage control. Evangeline gave a light, performative sigh. Daniel told us you've been a bit overwhelmed lately. I almost laughed. Overwhelmed? Edmund finally spoke, his voice low and deliberate. Camille, we understand you're upset. Marriages are difficult. Emotions run high. But what you're doing, digging through accounts, making threats, that's not how civilized people handle things. I stared at them, stunned by the audacity. Daniel had laundered money. Lied. Cheated. Risked my safety. And I was the problem? You expect me to stay silent? I asked, my voice calm, even too calm. Evangeline reached across the coffee table and placed a manicured hand on mine. Sweetheart, if you're willing to let this go, we can make the rest of this much smoother for you. There was the bribe, gift wrapped in gentle concern. Daniel watched me closely like he always did, measuring, calculating. I slid my hand out from under hers. And if I don't? Evangeline's smile didn't falter, but her eyes turned colder. Then you'll be choosing the harder path. For everyone. I leaned back slowly. Get out of my home. She blinked, then stood, smoothing her coat like it pained her to touch my furniture. Think about it, dear, she said, tone saccharine. We wouldn't want this to get uglier than necessary. That night I found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single bullet. I held it in my palm, the weight of it humming against my skin. This wasn't just about image anymore. Someone was escalating. I placed the bullet on the table and inhaled deeply. Then I called the one person I trusted. Sarah picked up on the second ring. Camille. What's wrong? My voice trembled, but only for a second. I need your help. And I need it now. The next morning I sent one message to the Caldwells. To Evangeline and Edmund. Subject, Director. I don't scare easy. And the next step. Strike first, before the Caldwells tightened their grip any further. I sat across from Sarah in her private office overlooking Midtown, the sound of traffic humming beneath us. She flipped through a thick folder of documents, her sharp red nails tapping against the table with every page. The weight of the moment pressed against my chest. But underneath that, fire. Purpose. Absolute clarity. This is it, Sarah said, sliding the final page toward me. Once you sign, it's official. Divorce. But this wasn't just a signature. It wasn't just freedom. It was justice. Retribution. I don't just want out, I murmured, fingers tightening around the pen. I want to make sure he never gets to do this to another woman. Not ever again. Sarah nodded once, her expression unreadable but fierce. Then we do it right. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. You know Daniel won't take this quietly, right? I met her gaze and exhaled. I'm counting on it. I signed. Across the city, Daniel walked into his office, expecting another ordinary morning. What he got was far from it. He hadn't even set his briefcase down when his assistant rushed over, face pale. Mr. Caldwell, you need to come to accounting. Now. A pit opened in his stomach. When he stepped into the glass-walled conference room, a team of auditors from corporate compliance were already there. Spreadsheets, account summaries, and flagged transactions were scattered across the table like pieces of a crime scene. What the hell is this? He barked. His boss, once an ally, barely looked up. Routine internal review, he said coolly. Some discrepancies popped up in recent expense reports. We just have a few questions. Daniel tried to smirk to summon that signature charm. You don't actually think. We'll see, his boss cut him off. He could feel it then. The shift. The cold eyes. The smell of blood in the water. Someone had tipped them off. His mind went straight to me. I was stirring oat milk into my coffee at a quiet cafe near the Met when he stormed in. Of all places to run into him, it almost felt cinematic. His eyes met mine. His whole face twisted. What the hell do you think you're doing? He hissed. Loud enough for everyone to hear. I sipped my latte. Composed. Getting coffee, I said. His voice rose. You went to my company. Did I? I tilted my head. Or are your own lies finally catching up? His fists clenched. You're trying to ruin me. I smiled softly. No, Daniel. You did that all by yourself. I set my coffee cup down and locked eyes with him. No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. Silence fell over the cafe like a weighted blanket. The baristas paused. Conversations quieted. Daniel wasn't used to this. To being challenged publicly. To someone speaking without fear of him. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain. But I knew better. He wasn't folding. He was recalculating. And so was I. That night, I woke to the sharp buzz of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. I blinked against the glow of the screen, still half dreaming, until I saw the flood of notifications. Texts. Emails. Missed calls. Dozens of them. My first thought was Sarah. Maybe she had news. Maybe the auditors had moved faster than we expected. But then I saw the subject lines. And my heart dropped. Liar. Gold digger. Unstable witch. Post after post. DM after DM. Daniel had gone nuclear. He wasn't just fighting back, he was launching a campaign to destroy me. I opened an email from Marissa, an old friend from NYU. Camille. I don't know what's going on, but Daniel is saying you made up the fraud claims. He told people you've been cheating, that you cleaned out his accounts and tried to pin everything on him. Is any of this true? I'm just shocked. My hands trembled as I read the words. A bitter laugh escaped me. Classic Daniel. Cornered, exposed, and flailing. So he did what men like him always did. Rewrote the story, cast himself as the heartbroken husband, painted me as the manipulative, unstable wife unraveling out of spite. It was desperate. And it was predictable. But he underestimated me. I had barely made it halfway through my coffee when another call came in. Unknown number. I nearly let it go to voicemail. But something in my gut, it told me to answer. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello. Pause. Then a low, gravelly voice I didn't recognize. This isn't just about your marriage anymore, the caller said flatly. Walk away. My blood turned cold. Who is this? Silence. Then a quiet exhale. You don't want to know. The line went dead. This wasn't intimidation. This was a warning. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bag and drove straight to Sarah's office. This is escalating, Sarah muttered, pacing behind her glass desk, arms folded tightly across her chest. The skyline behind her glittered with late afternoon light, but inside her office the air was tense. No kidding, I snapped, tossing my phone onto the desk. First he slanders me, now I'm getting anonymous threats. Sarah rubbed her temples, jaw clenched. Camille, we always knew Daniel would fight dirty. But this. I leaned forward, voice low. This feels bigger. She paused, then nodded slowly. It is. Which means he's scared. And when Daniel gets scared, he reaches for power. I frowned. Power. He knows people. Investors. Lawyers. Politicians even. You don't know how far this goes. If he's calling in favors, it means he's trying to shut you down before the truth exposes him, and maybe more. The room fell quiet. Her words echoed inside me. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about everyone who had propped him up. But if they thought fear would stop me, they didn't know who they were dealing with. Later that afternoon my phone buzzed again. I hesitated before answering. Celeste Caldwell. Daniel's younger sister. I almost let it ring out. But curiosity won. Camille. Her voice was tentative, softer than I remembered. Hey. I don't know what to believe. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. Celeste. I mean, she rushed, he's my brother. I know he lies. I know he's manipulative. But this is a lot. My parents are saying you're doing this for money. And you believe them? Pause. I don't know. That's just it. I don't know. You've always known, I said gently. You just didn't want to admit it. She was silent for a long moment. Then barely a whisper, I don't know what to do. You don't have to pick a side, Celeste, I replied, soft but steady. But don't be another piece of the lie. Her breath hitched. He won't stop, Camille. You know that, right? I smiled bitterly. Neither will I. That night as I was pouring tea, the doorbell rang. I expected Sarah. Maybe even Celeste. But when I opened the door I froze. It was Dorian, Daniel's longtime business partner. The last person I ever thought would come to me. Dorian looked uneasy, glancing over his shoulder before stepping into my apartment. He didn't sit, didn't take off his coat. I can't stay long, he said quickly. But you need to know, Daniel's losing his grip at work. I straightened. The internal audit? It's worse than he thought. His voice was low, urgent. People are talking, Camille. Serious people. Legal's getting involved. And, some of us, we don't want to go down with him. He met my eyes, his expression torn but resolute. I have access to his records. Emails. Real expense reports, the ones that haven't been doctored. A slow ember of hope sparked in my chest. If you're willing to fight, Dorian said, voice firm now, I can help. I nodded, a small smile curling at the corners of my mouth for the first time in days. I'm more than willing. As soon as Dorian left, I grabbed my laptop. My hands flew over the keys. I didn't need to argue with the world anymore. I didn't need to defend my name on social media or explain myself to people who'd already picked sides. Because I had something Daniel never would. And I was finally ready to use it. Late that night, another message lit up my screen. Emma Caldwell. We need to talk. I stared at the notification, pulse steady. Could it be a trap? Another ploy? But no. Deep down I already knew. Daniel had never been loyal to anyone. He demanded it, yes, but he never gave it. And women like Emma? They were temporary, youthful, disposable. I called her. She answered on the first ring. He used me. Her voice trembled with fury. I let out a cold laugh. You're just figuring that out? No, she said bitterly. I knew. I thought he'd at least keep his promises. She had been played. Left behind the second she was inconvenient. I didn't pity her. But I understood her. What do you have? I asked. Pause. Then with a grim chuckle, everything. Bank transfers. Internal memos. Screenshots of Daniel walking her through how to disguise embezzlement as marketing expenses. He hadn't just used her. He'd implicated her. No. She wanted revenge. I sent it all to Sarah. Her reply came seconds later. Sarah, this is it. He's finished. And just like that I smiled. It started small. But it was real. A whistleblower post on an anonymous finance forum. A leaked screenshot. An internal memo. At first no one was sure if it was real. Just rumors maybe. Gossip from someone with a grudge. But then came more. Dozens of receipts, spreadsheets, encrypted messages. Soon, Daniel Caldwell's name was everywhere. Corporate fraud. Embezzlement. Hidden accounts. His carefully curated empire wasn't just wobbling, it was caving in on itself, brick by brittle brick. And I was only getting started. The call came just after noon. Sarah's voice was electric with energy. They've launched a full investigation, she said. Legal. Compliance. Sir. It's official. I closed my eyes, letting the satisfaction settle deep in my chest like a quiet victory anthem. Daniel had spent years building his brand, wrapping lies in charisma until even he believed them. But now, he was exposed. Are they taking it seriously? I asked. They have no choice, she said. Too much has come out. They can't bury it anymore. I glanced at my laptop. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Articles flooding in from financial blogs, news outlets, even LinkedIn insiders. Employees were coming forward. Whispers were becoming voices. Voices were becoming headlines. Good, I said under my breath. Not just good, Sarah replied. Camille, it's perfect. He's spiraling. And I could picture it. Daniel pacing his office, sweating behind designer suits, watching the story he'd crafted so carefully slip through his fingers. I should have expected the retaliation. By that night his face was on every screen. Smirking into cameras. Sitting for desperate interviews. Crying foul. Claiming I was the abusive one. That I masterminded the fraud. He tried to buy back loyalty, call in favors, paint himself as the innocent. But the narrative cracked. The public didn't buy it. His former employees came forward. His best friend from college posted a statement. Even Celeste, his loyal, always silent sister, publicly stepped back. For the first time in his life, Daniel was losing control. And I was no longer afraid. Then came the final blow. I sat before the camera, my hands still, my voice steady. I told the truth. Years of coercion. Gaslighting. Financial abuse. The slap that shattered the illusion. No tears. No theatrics. Just honesty. And by the time the video ended, the world finally saw who Daniel Caldwell really was. His kingdom wasn't cracking anymore. It was burning. And I was the one who struck the match. But the fire? It was still burning. Daniel Caldwell walked into his Manhattan office that morning with his shoulders rigid, his jaw tight, and the weight of unraveling power pressing on his chest. He had spent the night working every contact in his phone, calling in favors, trying to find a way out. A loophole. A narrative to spin. Something, anything to make the wreckage look like smoke, not flames. But the moment the elevator doors opened, he knew. The atmosphere was too still. Conversations hushed as he passed. No one met his eyes. No assistant at her desk. Just two stone-faced security guards standing at the glass doors of the executive conference room. Waiting. Inside, Dorian sat at the head of the table with the entire executive board. Daniel's boss, a man who once called him the company's future, looked at him now like he was something he regretted investing in. Daniel, his boss said, voice cold. Sit. Daniel didn't move. This is a mistake. Dorian slid a thick folder across the table. No, Daniel, he said quietly. You made the mistake. Inside, pages of flagged wire transfers, fake vendor profiles, signature authorizations, and the damning email threads tying it all to him. Silence stretched across the room. Finally, his boss sighed. Your position is terminated. Effective immediately. Legal action is already in motion. Daniel's world tilted on its axis. You can't do this. One of the board members, once a close ally, leaned back in his chair. You did this to yourself. Security stepped forward. Their hands gripped his arms, firm but unshaken. He barely processed it. Down the hallway. Past employees who once hung on his every word. Now they only stared. Some smirked. And by the time they pushed him through the glass doors onto Fifth Avenue, the cameras were already waiting. Reporters. Microphones. Flashing bulbs. Daniel, do you have a statement? Someone shouted. He ducked his head, silent. His accounts. Frozen. His name. Plastered across headlines. And the lawsuits? Just beginning. He drove home in silence, white-knuckled. Desperate. But when he opened the door to the Caldwell townhouse, he found them already waiting. Evangeline, cross-legged on the leather sofa, sipping tea with cold elegance. Edmund, silent at the window. Celeste, slouched in a chair, arms folded. Her eyes refused to rise. Daniel realized then. Even his family was beginning to turn. Daniel took a shaky breath. So, you heard. Evangeline finally looked up from her tea. Of course we heard. Then you know I need. What you need, she snapped, cutting him off with the sharp clink of porcelain against the saucer. What you need, Daniel, is to understand the destruction you've caused. His patience snapped. I'm your son. Edmund turned from the window then, his expression carved from granite. Not anymore. The words hit harder than every headline, every subpoena. Daniel's voice dropped into a growl. Everything I built was for this family. Evangeline raised a brow. And now you've burned it to the ground. He turned to Celeste, his voice cracking. You believe them? She met his gaze just for a moment and then shook her head, eyes glassy. I don't need to believe them, she whispered. I know. His hands curled into fists. You're all abandoning me. Evangeline stood, her movements composed, cold. We're cleaning up your mess, she said, brushing invisible lint from her dress. And you, Daniel, are no longer our responsibility. And just like that, they turned their backs. He was alone. Utterly, irreversibly alone. I agreed to meet him one last time. Not for closure. Not out of sympathy. But because I needed to see him like this, to remind myself of the truth. He sat slumped in a worn coat, hunched over a chip table in a no-name cafe on the Lower East Side. No custom suit. No Rolex. No smirk. Just a shell. I sat across from him and folded my hands. This is the part where you blame me, I said softly. He said nothing. Or maybe you beg. Still silence. I studied him. He looked smaller. Hollowed out. His hands trembled as they wrapped around a paper cup of black coffee. You know what's funny? I said, leaning just slightly forward. I don't even hate you anymore. He looked at me and for the first time there was nothing there. No fury. No charm. No mask. Just a void. I stood and slipped my purse over my shoulder. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Daniel. Then I walked away. For the first time, revenge didn't feel like triumph. It felt like peace. I woke the next morning to soft light streaming through the sheer curtains of my new apartment. The air was quiet. My bed warm. The walls were bare. The furniture modest. But it was mine. And for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. I reached across the cafe table and gently squeezed Sarah's hand. Then don't be, I said softly. She gave me a small, grateful smile. I won't. That evening, a new message lit up my phone. Dorian. I heard you were looking for a fresh start. If you're open to it, there's a position at my firm. No pressure, just think about it. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. A fresh start. Not just leaving behind something broken, but choosing to build something entirely my own. My reply was simple. Me. I'm in. I set the phone down, stepped out onto my balcony and let the city air wrap around me. Manhattan buzzed beneath me. Taxis, laughter, life. For years I had lived in survival mode. But now I was finally living. Life has a way of teaching its lessons brutally, unforgiving, unfiltered. But if there's one thing this journey has taught me, it's this: survival isn't enough. We're not here just to endure. We're here to live fully, freely, unapologetically. For years, I believed that endurance was strength. That if I just held on long enough, things would get better. That love meant shrinking myself, erasing myself to keep someone else comfortable. I was wrong. Strength isn't staying in a place where you're belittled, controlled, or afraid. Strength is walking away, especially when your knees are shaking. Strength is choosing yourself. Maybe you've been where I was. Maybe you felt stuck, unheard, unseen. Afraid to take that first step because you don't know where you'll land. Let me tell you something. You will land. You'll stumble, sure. But you'll rise. The fear of the unknown is nothing compared to the quiet pain of staying where you're not valued. And if you're watching this wondering if it's too late, it's not. It never is. You can start over. You can choose yourself. You can build something better. Something that belongs only to you. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from something toxic? What gave you the courage to finally say enough? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story resonated with you, or tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories reach. And if this video wasn't for you, I'd still love to hear why. Your voice matters. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe. Because life isn't just about endings. It's about the powerful beginnings waiting on the other side. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. Telling this story wasn't easy, but I didn't do it for pity. I shared it because I know there's someone out there who needed to hear that survival is not the finish line. That starting over isn't weakness. That walking away isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. So now I want to hear from you. If you were with me through this journey, if you felt the weight of every lie, every betrayal, and still rooted for me to rise, I want you to leave a comment. Tell me, what would you say to the woman I used to be? What advice would you give her? And more importantly, what would you tell yourself? Drop a message in the comments, not just for me, but for you. For anyone scrolling through this video quietly wondering if their story matters. Let them see yours. Let's fill this space with truth, with support, and with strength. And if you're living your own version of my story right now, if you're scared, tired, unsure, I need you to remember something. You are allowed to leave what hurts. You are allowed to heal. You are allowed to rebuild without permission. You don't have to have a perfect plan. You just need one clear moment of courage to say enough. That moment changed my life. It can change yours too. So if this story moved you even a little, hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not for the algorithm, not for the numbers, but because stories like ours deserve to be heard. Because healing isn't just personal, it's powerful. And sometimes all it takes to begin again is knowing you're not alone.